history. So I want to talk about that today, and welcome to my channel. This is a new podcast that we have going on with preparing for your season of elevation. It is a memoir that I wrote last year to begin documenting my life and the many ways that um, I remember things and, just to kind of chart life. I think it's important for us in this time and season for us to chart our own history. We see everywhere where history is being pulled out of the libraries. Our history is being pulled out of the schools. Our history is just being pulled out. And the one thing I aim to do with my channel is to make sure that I am elevating the voices of others while I'm also sharing my stories and preparing for additional seasons of elevation, as you should as well. So yesterday we talked about the importance of developing a timeline as you begin to tell your story. We talked about developing a timeline so that you could look at your life in increments, right? Uh, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, et cetera, up into the age that you are. And I gave the assignment for you all to write one line for each year of birth represented within that increment, and also to uh, write something about a major event. For example, my life 1 through 5, I was sharing last night. Well, I didn't share that part, but I was actually a premature baby and born during some very turbulent times, and had the devil had his way, I would not be here, but God had a different plan as a messenger of hope who breathes life into the vision of other people. But also during that time, I was raised during the 60s and 70s. So that was a time of true turbulence, civil rights, voters' right, all the things, and considering all the ways that we were being impacted by the climate of that time. And so my assignment to you all to yesterday, I gave the assignment to begin to think about your ancestry. And so as I thought about that today, I began to think about what will I share. And I want you all to understand something about this table that I'm building here, is that I want it to be transparent, because I think that for many, many, many years, as a community, as a culture, we have literally swept things under the rug, things that have caused our families to live in trauma. And so one of my goals as a community health and human service educator is to begin the process of community healing, one individual, one family at a time, right? So when I think about my family ancestry, which was the point of discussion tonight, I think about I thought about my grandmother and my dad, and I thought about all the dynamics. And I'll start with my maternal grandparents. Um, my mother passed away 3 years ago. She was an only child and born to Seegers. My granddad, Alfonso, was it Alfonso? I don't even know my granddaddy's first name. It's a shame I didn't spend much time with him. We called him Granddaddy Seegers. We called him Granddaddy Seegers and Grandma Seegers, Bessie Seegers and Granddad Seegers. They were from a small town called Darlington, South Carolina, down near Lumberton in South Carolina. And before my mom passed, because I didn't know much about my grandparents' history or either my cousins or on that side or aunties or anything really, because My mom was an only child, and she really did live life like an only child. Um, but we did get to visit sometime. My grandmother was living in, migrated to Baltimore, Maryland. Her and my granddad. No, yeah, her and my granddad, and lived there for some time together with other family and friends. I think they all kind of migrated from the South because they were descendants of slaves, were slaves. My granddaddy was a slave, and my grandmother, great grandmother, was a slave. And in that area where the tribal Indians were, their land was being taken from them and being controlled by um, the white man. So, what I remember about my grandma and granddaddy. So, let me reel it back for a second because prior to my mom dying, I really wanted to know her family. I was like, wow, my mom is not doing well. I don't know her family. And I was on a conference one weekend, and I decided that when I left the conference, I detoured. I detoured and went to find this place where my mom lived, this place where she went to school, her city, all the things. I just had a desire to be connected to my mother, who at the time did not have the ability to articulate. We believe she had had another stroke. So I was reading this book called Black Indians, and it's a very extensive body of research about the existence of blacks and Indians in America, and how the slavery in this particular in the South began, right? So after reading that, I began like, I want to find this river. I need to find this river where these slaves were coming in, or these Indians were being sent back and being snatched, and blacks were being pulled in. So there was a lot going on in the story about the Black Indians. And so I wanted to find this place. So I put it into my GPS and decided I was going to go, and I was going to find this river. And it landed me in the middle of the city, like literally in the middle of the city. And so at least I knew that at one point the river ran this way, or there was an entry point of this is where the river ran. But they had built up around it, as we clearly that happens over time, with transportation rerouting and rebuilding and shifting, and just manipulating the environment and the flow of the ecosystem. And so here I am in this city, and I says, well, I want to go and find out more about my grandparents. And so with their last name being Siggers, the first thing I did was hit the city hall, and you know went to discovered that the Seegers were actually white people who had a mill plant, had factories and all kinds of things. And I'm not sure if even maybe my grandma and granddaddy were given these names, or they were descendants of these individuals who owned these manufacturers. At any rate, I took pictures. I went to my mama's school, Lamar, which is close by as well. My granddaddy was from Lamar. My grandmother was from Darlington, and that's where they hooked up. And um, so I went and I took pictures of my mom's high school, and took pictures of all the signs and the factories and things that I could discover, because this was a weekend, so I couldn't get into City Hall. I could not get documents or anything like that. Well, long story short of it, I came back home and I showed my mom the picture. She was not able to really articulate, but it brought a smile to her face knowing that, I had that piece of literature. And I have literally spent 2 days looking in my phone for those pictures. Mind you, now I don't throw phones away. So I have about 6 or 7 cell phones. And I'm looking for the pictures of those that I took of my mom's of hometown. Okay, so we know that my maternal parents were from Lamar and Darlington, and they were, facing, slavery and all those things. Grandma Almina lived until she was 99 years old. She was a full-blooded Indian, um, with hair down to her kneecaps. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I used to just love to stroke her hair. um, Whenever I visited Baltimore, that's where I spent my time with my great grandmother. Now, the next time I would see my grandmother, aside from her family in Baltimore, the next time I would see her would be when my mom and dad moved into their new home, and mommy needed help. My mom needed help because she had 6 children. With 6 children, it was very hard. Mom's now outside of the house working, not just being a stay-at-home mom anymore, homemaker, which she loved and loved nurturing and taking care of her family. Because my dad was also a brick mason, so he was an entrepreneur. So he was always gone. He was always on the job. He was always building and working very, very long hours. At the same time, we somebody need to watch after the tribe, right? So there's 6 of us. And what I remember about my grandmother, who did not communicate very effectively to me at all as a child, I think most of the things I ever heard from her were, um, she was she was grandma. She had a foul language. Um, she drank a lot. She did what she came to do. She did what she came to do, and that's take care of us and keep our hair combed, keep us fed, um, make sure we were okay. And but then she spent her time, and grandma had a hard life. I believe she had a really hard life because of what I remember. Because I remember, the alcoholism, but also remember that she was without her husband when she came, and that when he did come, when granddaddy did finally visit, um, he would fight. He would fight her so bad. And he would drink a little, but drink a lot. He was an alcoholic. So here we have this history of alcoholism in our families. And I'm talking about this because I want this to be a table where we begin to heal, where we begin to heal from the inside out through our story. So let me say this. If by any chance you hear something, anything on this channel as I am sharing with you, and that it triggers you in any way, please find a friend, find some help, find your spouse, a loved one that you can talk to, because the goal is that we begin to have transparent conversations um, about our history. Why not? There's good things, there's bad things, there's indifferent things. There was always crisis, right? And we didn't always start it. So so let's just start right there, right? I can't imagine growing up in a time that was so turbulent where you were actually a slave. I know they were running from something, because we always asked our mom, like, why, how did you meet dad? So here we go. How did you meet dad? So there's a long story behind how my mom and dad met, but I believe that they got together on because each other's boyfriend or girlfriends were doing something else with other. The story is they it was a payback. It seemed like it was a payback. It seemed like there was some kind of payback going on. Don't know the full story, but one day I'm going to talk to my auntie and get the full story because there's only one sister left, and hopefully I can get to her and get that full story. Because my mom seemed like a very passive and timid lady. She was very young. She was 18 years old when she met my dad. Beautiful, beautiful, absolutely beautiful woman. But I don't know her story. All I know is that life was not easy and that they were running from some things, especially my granddad who beat my grandma, and would abuse her. And maybe that was why grandma was the way she was. We never know. You just never know why people are the way that they are because back in the day, we were always told, don't you tell what's going on in my house or don't you, tell my business. But that's why many of our families have been struggling for so long. So let's talk about so that's my maternal side. My mother, my grandmother, and my granddad were from the South Carolina, Lumberton, Darlington, Lamar. He was a Sigger, so white, black, Indian, all that was going on. My mom was a full blood. I mean, like I look at my mom. If you ever see her, y'all, if I post a picture, you're gonna be like, yes. So anyway, uh, my dad was from a very large family as well, but his father passed away when he was a little boy. His father was disabled. My dad had a lot of animosity, and I can tell by the way he treated his actions. Like he was from a very large family, and he used to always say things like his children were never going to be hungry, and that he was, of course, from this city, Greenville, North Carolina. This is where my dad was from. I now live here where my dad was from. And but my parents migrated to Philadelphia, so we came back to my dad's home. I moved to my dad's hometown after I was found by my husband. So anyway, I'm hopping around a little bit, but you get it, right? This is about telling a story, like your ancestral origins, which can make you jump around a little bit. And then there was so my dad, uh, from what I understand, was married. He had been married before and he had never divorced. Um, and then there was my mom, or there was another woman even in between them. And then there was my mom. And my mom and my dad had 6 children together. They were common law, what you call common law married. Um, but there was a lot going on there too. So again, my dad's people were from the South, Greenville, North Carolina. And they were a very large family of girls and boys. And my dad was not the youngest, but close somewhere nearby, somewhere. Yeah, I think he was younger than, he was a knee baby, I believe. He was a knee baby. But anyway, that's the origin of my parents. My dad was a black man. My mom was an Indian. Uh, she was definitely She was with the Black Indians down there in Lumbee. I don't have her tribal number, but I wish I did because man, they got benefits, So we didn't we're being deprived of the benefits that the tribe had because they usurped their land. They usurped that land down there and they ran. My mom, they ran. They were running. They were on the run. And so that's how my mom met my dad. But nevertheless, the story of the day was to what is your family ancestral origin? What is your family ancestral origin? So we are on this February challenge to identify our Black history. And sometimes we're gonna trip upon our stories, and we're gonna see the good parts. We're gonna see things that weren't so good. And that's okay, because those are the things that we need to understand. We need to understand the things that went wrong, and that, things that we can now pray for, that our families, we it explains things. It explains what we felt. It explains the trauma that recycle is from generation to the generational trauma. It explains the generational trauma that we experience from generation to generation. And it gives us an opportunity to pray for our children. One of my goals is to leave a community, a legacy that's free of adverse experiences, because it wasn't until I was an adult to realize that how important it was for us to have these conversations. There's no way that we can be the best possible version of ourselves without really delving into the things, all the things that we experience in family. And some say, well, I don't have a humdrum story. Maybe you don't. But many of us have stories, and we pick our customers up where we pick them up in the story, right? Because there are people out there. There's another Black woman who can relate to me. There's another Black woman who can relate to having a family that was enslaved, or families that were from the South, or families that were, in turmoil. And, there we all have some kinfolk, that we all have some kinfolk, and we all have our own struggles, right? Because we are not perfect. We are perfectly imperfect human beings. And I want to begin having these conversations. So yes, today's assignment was, what is your family ancestral origin? And then I want you to write about that, because when you can begin to write about that in the back of in my journal, when I tell these stories, it's a place for you to reflect, right? It's a place for you to begin reflecting and to write. And so you can begin to analyze, have an analysis of your own story, have discussions, start informed groups, start informed healing spaces where, because we are called to take care of each other. Like God's original intent for us was to manage, and multiply in the earth. And that means in every area of our life. And not only that, but to mentor, because he said that if we, if I know I heard it put this way, if we die, if with everything we knew, if we die with everything we knew, then we were ineffective leaders. So my goal is to encourage other people to come outside of that comfort place and mentor others. We're all maybe two steps ahead, two processes ahead of helping someone else and showing them how to come up out of a situation. So our stories help us to be able to do that. I am grateful to God for what He has given me in the ministry of Touch One Life, Touch Millions. That is what, I'm called to breathe life into the vision of others as a messenger of hope. But how can I do that except I share my stories? How can I do that except I testify to the goodness of God and all that He's done for me? And so I will come here to share these stories and how he brought me out, because I look back even over, he reminds me of how he kept me. He reminds me of even the joy and innocence that I had, and, how he never left me, regardless of what it looked like. He never left. And so I am encouraging you today. So the next prompt is, what is the history behind your family's name? Now, I gave y'all part of mine today, and that was Seegers. And Seegers was, like I said, they were a whole business down there. I looked them all up, y'all. And my niece has actually done some ancestral mapping. So I'm going to be really excited about putting all that together in the next series of Touch One Life, Touch Millions, because I write a series beginning with the first of the series was preparing for your season of elevation, which is why this table is here, which is why we're having these conversations. And it is my hope that this channel will allow us to be able to have the important conversations. And I want to know what you came up with in your story, because I can go a whole lot deeper into my dad's story. But the point of this question prompt today was only his ancestral origin. But there were other things that I talk about in the book that I think, because of understanding my dad's origin, and how him and my mom came to be, the fact that he was married and never divorced, the fact that there was another person in between my mom and dad, and then that there were there was a whole lot of things going on in the life of my parents, whom I love very much. And our stories are not here to discredit them. Our stories are here to help us heal and help us to navigate through life's trials, right? So again, to the next prompt is, what is the history behind your family's name? And I want you to write about it. Just write a brief narrative about what is the history behind your family's name. And I don't know who's here because I'm actually not even looking at the screen right now. Let me see. I don't think there is any. Oh, two watching now. It says two people are watching. I don't see anyone, but if you are here, say hello. I can't see you. And if you have any questions, but I'm going to leave this live here. Again, this one is my family origin on our 29-day journey. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about, I know I'm giving the prompt of what is the history behind your family's name. Oh, I have done a lot of this because I talked about how and where did your grandparents meet. You can make a choice, okay? Because I lumped some of this all together. And probably if I had just written about that particular ancestral origin and just wrote about it, I could have flowed a lot better. But who cares, right? We're here to have conversation, and conversation is not always, like smooth flowing. You have conversation. You're a real person showing up in a real space where you hope that you can help real people get started on this journey to preparing for their season of elevation by really, really taking a dive into their own story. So anyway, we said we're talking about your name. What is the history behind your family's name? How and where did your grandparents meet? And then it asks what events happened in history the year you were born. So I already talked about that, but we'll talk about it again tomorrow. So chime into those couple of questions, see what you come up with. I would love to hear from you. And if you are interested in joining our circle, our community circle of support, we are putting together a community circle. We have a group already. But if you'd like to, I'll put the email here in the chat, and you can connect and send me a DM or email, or just put here social support, just social support, or yeah, that's what we're gonna put. We'll put social support as the thing to write, and we'll give you a link. We'll pull you out a link so that you can follow us and that you can join us in our small group, so that we can continue having conversations. So again, this is the podcast Preparing for Your Season of Elevation, and you are listening to Dr. Eve, and welcome again to my channel. Peace and blessings to you all. Hope you have the most amazing day. And whatever you do, let no one get in the way on your journey beyond or to becoming. Peace and blessings, everyone.